The Viking Age, spanning approximately from the 8th century to the early 11th century, a significant period in European history, characterized by the expansive maritime and overland adventures of Norsemen from Scandinavia. This era commenced with the notorious 793 AD raid on the Lindisfarne monastery in England, an event that heralded a new wave of exploration, raiding, and settlement by Vikings across Europe and beyond. They were known for their fearsome reputation as warriors and pirates, but also established themselves as traders and colonizers, founding important settlements in Iceland, Greenland, and briefly in North America at Newfoundland. Today, I'm going to discuss some famous Vikings. Perhaps you've heard their names, but not yet their stories. Ragnar Lodbrok, Leif Erikson, Bjorn Ironside, and Ivar the Boneless. But first of all, welcome to the channel. If it is your first time here, it's great to meet you. And if you are coming back, well, today's going to be a little bit of a different format. As always, if you want to support the channel, you're already doing it by enjoying the content. If you want to go above and beyond, a like and subscribe always helps, and check the video description. Now, without further ado, let's get nice and comfortable. We're going to begin with one Ragnar Lodbrok. I'm sure you've heard the name, perhaps from the television program that was about his life. I've not seen it myself, but I know many people have. So let's start with Ragnar. Ragnar Lodbrok, a seminal figure in Norse legend and Viking history, is portrayed in numerous Icelandic sagas as a heroic and formidable character, whose exploits and lineage are detailed across various sources. He was born to Sigurd Ring, the reigning king of Sweden, and at times Denmark. The sagas uniformly recognize Ragnar's grandfather as the Danish king Randver, son of Sigurd's father and Randver's mother, Asa. Asa was the daughter of King Harald with the red mustache from Norway, and Randver was noted as a grandson of the legendary Scandinavian king Ivar Vidfam through Ivar's daughter Aud, also referred to as Alfhild in the Hervera saga. Following King Ivar Vidfamne's death, his grandson Harald, born to Aud and the Danish king Hroðgar Ringslinger, consolidated his father's territories under his rule, earning the moniker Harald Wartooth. After the death of Randver, Sigurd Ring assumed the mantle of chief king of Sweden, and according to some sagas, Denmark as well, acting possibly as a sub-king under his cousin Harald Wartooth. A significant event in Sigurd's reign was his confrontation with Harald Wartooth at the Battle of the Bravallir on the plains of Ostergotland. This legendary battle resulted in Harald's death, along with many of his men, solidifying Sigurd's rule over both Sweden and Denmark. Sigurd is sometimes conflated with a Danish king named Sigfred, who historically ruled from about 770 until his death prior to 804. Thus, Sigurd fathered Ragnar with Princess Alfhild from the petty kingdom of Alfheimr. Ragnar's physique and demeanor are celebrated in the saga, described as, and I quote, the biggest and fairest of men that human eyes have ever seen. He resembled his mother in appearance, and mirrored her family's traits. His initial heroic feat involved killing a giant serpent that guarded Thora Borgarhjord, the daughter of the Geatish Jarl Heraud. Ragnar's successful slaying of the serpent, while donning peculiar protective clothing, earned him the name Lodbrok. Thus he married Thora, and they had 2 sons, Eric and Agnar. After Thora's death, Ragnar's life took another turn when he encountered Kraka, a woman of extraordinary beauty and wisdom, living with a poor peasant couple in Norway. Upon marrying her, she bore him several renowned sons, Ivar the Boneless, Bjorn Ironside, Hvitserk, Ragnvald, and Sigurd Snake in the Eye. Kraka was later revealed to be Aslaug, the secret daughter of the famous hero Sigurd Fafnisbane. As his sons matured into formidable warriors, Ragnar, driven by a desire not to be outdone, resolved to conquer England with just 2 ships. This audacious attempt ended in his capture by King Aella of Northumbria, who executed him by throwing him into a snake pit. His agonizing death spurred his sons to form the Great Heathen Army, which invaded England around 866 to exact revenge on King Aella, culminating in a saga that interweaves themes of bravery, vengeance, and destiny across the Norse myths. But of course, we have different sources from different sagas about Ragnar. The Chronicon Roskildens, written around 1138, presents Ragnar as the father of Ivar the Boneless, who is described as an exceedingly cruel Norse king, along with his brothers Ingvar, Bjorn, Ubi, and Ulf. These sons are depicted as rulers of the northern peoples, who rally various Danish petty kings to assault the Frankish realm. Contrary to the Icelandic saga's portrayal of Ivar's campaigns in Britain as acts of vengeance for Ragnar's death, the Chronicon Roskildens suggests that these were simply military campaigns, born of conquest. Well, by approximately 1190, Sven Agason's chronicle is the first Danish source to mention Ragnar, with his more complete title, Ragnar Lodbrok. His son Sigurd is shown invading Denmark, overthrowing and killing the Danish king, and even marrying the king's daughter, thereby establishing himself on the Danish throne. Their progeny includes Canute, who becomes an ancestor to the subsequent Danish monarchs. Yet it is only with Saxo Grammaticus's Gesta Danorum around 1200 that Ragnar is portrayed as a Danish king. Saxo, blending Norse legend with historical data from Adam of Bremen's earlier chronicle, reimagines Ragnar's lineage and deeds. You see, in this account, Ragnar's father, Sigurd Ring, is depicted as a Norwegian prince married to a Danish princess, distinct from the Sigurd associated with the Battle of Bravelir, which occurred about 13 generations prior. After both Sigurd Ring and his cousin and rival, Ring, equated with the historical figures Sigfrid and Annulo, who died in 812, after both of those died in battle, Ragnar ascends to the Danish throne, identified by Saxo with a historical figure, Ragnfred, who had died in 814. One of Ragnar's significant early feats in Saxo's narrative is his victory over the Swedish king Frå, who had killed Ragnar's grandfather. Assisting Ragnar in this battle is the formidable shield maiden Lagerda, whom Ragnar compels to marry him after he demonstrates his valor by slaying a bear and a hound that guarded her. This union produces a son, Fridleif, and 2 daughters. Ragnar's subsequent marriage to Thora Borgahjord, the daughter of the Swedish king Heroder, follows his heroic killing of 2 venomous giant snakes that were protecting Thora's home. With Thora, Ragnar fathers several sons, Radbard, Dunvat, Sigurd's snake in the eye, Bjorn Ironside, Agnar, and Ivar the Boneless, just like in the other sagas, but with a few little changes. Additionally, Ragnar has a son named Ube from a non-marital relationship in this saga, with a woman described only as the daughter of a man named Esbjorn. Ragnar's final marriage to Svanlaug, possibly another name for Aslaug, yields 3 more sons, Ragnvald, Erik Weatherhat, and Hvitserk. Saxo Grammaticus provides a grand and expansive account of Ragnar's reign, portraying him as a formidable Viking leader whose conquests spanned a vast geographical area, far beyond the typical scope of earlier Norse sagas. According to Saxo, Ragnar led numerous successful Viking expeditions, demonstrating both strategic prowess and also that famous relentless ambition. Ragnar's ventures began with an aggressive campaign in England, where he defeated and killed the English king Hama. Following this victory, he turned north, subduing the Earls of Scotland and installing his sons Sigurd Snake in the Eye and Radbard as governors of the region. His conquests continued in Norway, where he placed his son Fridleif in charge, extending his rule to include Orkney. The narrative then shifts to Sweden, where a new king, Sorl, emerged to challenge the claims of Thora's son to their heritage. In a decisive and brutal conflict, Ragnar and his 3 sons attacked Sorl, culminating in a massacre of Sorl's forces. Ragnar's son, Bjorn Ironside, was subsequently installed as the king of Sweden. But later, as the dynamics within his family began to shift, Ragnar appointed his other son, Erik Weatherhat, as the Swedish ruler, only for Erik to be killed by an adversary named Eystein. Saxo also details internal family conflicts, notably mentioning a rebellion led by Ragnar's son Ube, instigated by Ube's maternal grandfather Esbjorn. This insurrection was quelled only after a significant struggle, and it resulted in Ube's capture. The account continues with various expeditions to British Isles, during which Ragnar's sons Dunvat and Radbar lost their lives. Eola, the son of the slain king Hama, and supported by allies known as the Galli, likely being Norse Gaels, successfully ousted Ragnar's son, Ivar the Boneless, from England. Ivar's expulsion marked Aela as a continuing adversary to Ragnar's family. And in a more dramatic sequence of the saga, Hvitserk, another of Ragnar's sons, was captured and executed by the Hellespontian Prince Daxon, an event that spurred Ragnar to lead an expedition to Kievan Rus. Daxon was captured, but he was ultimately spared and simply exiled by Ragnar. Saxo also describes Ragnar's confrontations with the Bjarmians and the Finns in the Arctic North, who resisted him in an interesting way, not only with formidable military tactics, but apparently equally formidable magic. Nevertheless, the tribes were eventually defeated, adding another notch to Ragnar's list of conquests. Harald Klak, another historical figure, is portrayed as a recurring opponent who incited multiple rebellions against Ragnar, though he was consistently defeated. The culmination of Ragnar's saga occurs with his final expedition against King Aela, prompted by Aela's massacre of Ragnar's forces in Ireland. This last venture, of course, ends tragically for Ragnar. At this point, it was the time where he would meet his fate thrown into that snake pit, a demise that Saxo attributes to divine retribution for Ragnar's famous disdain and open hostility towards Christianity and Christians in general. While the narrative Norse sources primarily date from the 12th and 13th century, there are earlier poetic references to Ragnar Lodbrok and his kin, giving us a more complex origin and suggests a older development of his saga. There's no one stop when it comes to piecing together the cultural tales of Lodbrok. Now, one such earlier piece is the Ragnarsdrapa, attributed to the 9th century skald Bragi Bodasson, though recent scholarship does suggest that it was a work from around 1000 AD. This poem celebrates a Ragnar identified as the son of a Sigurd through a vivid description of a shield gifted to the poet, which features intricate designs of 4 legendary scenes, and they are as follows: the assault of the Jormunrek, the Hjadningavik tale, the ploughing of Gefjon, and Thor's encounter with the Midgard serpent. These images are interpreted as symbolic representations of events from the Lodbrok saga, reflecting the initial defeat of Ragnar's sons in England due to their recklessness, Ivar the Boneless's cunning tactics against King Aela, Ivar's deceptive land acquisition from Aela, and Ragnar's own legendary battle with the serpent to win the heart of Thora. Another poetic reference is found in the Knutsdrapa by Sigvart Thordarson, composed around 1038, and it mentions of the death of Aela at the hands of Ivar in York, vividly describing how Ivar carved the eagle on Aela's back. This gruesome detail, of course, refers to the alleged blood eagle punishment, a topic of considerable debate among modern scholars regarding its historicity. Now, additionally, the Krakumal is a poetic monologue traditionally placed in the mouth of a dying Ragnar in the snake pit. The poem recounts Ragnar's numerous exploits and battles across a wide geographical area, particularly within the British Isles. Despite its association with Kraka, the other name for Ragnar's wife Aslog, philological analysis suggests the poem was shaped into its current form sometime in the 12th century. A runic inscription on the prehistoric tumulus of Maeshowe in Orkney, dating from the early 12th century, also references Lodbrok. And the inscription reads like this: "This house was built a long time before Lodbrok's. Her sons, they were bold, scarcely ever were there such tall men of their hands." The use of her sons in this context has sparked theories that Lodbrok may have originally been considered a female figure, but it's a bit of a stretch. Some people think it's possibly a mythic matriarch of the formidable warriors traditionally identified as her sons. Now, the siege of Paris in 845, led by a Norse chieftain named Ragnar or Ragnar, marks a significant event in the Viking invasions of the West Frankish kingdom. This historical figure has often been tentatively identified with the legendary figure from the saga, Ragnar Lodbrok, though historians do remain divided on the accuracy of this identification. Notably, the same Ragnar is sometimes associated with a figure granted land in Torhout, Flanders, by Charles the Bold, around 841, but this figure later fell out of the king's favour. During their approach to Paris in 845, Ragnar's men raided Rouen as they travelled up the Seine. Charles the Bold, determined to protect the royal abbey of St. Denis from destruction, mobilized an army, which he strategically divided to guard each side of the river. Ragnar's forces attacked one division of this smaller Frankish army, capturing around 100 men and executing them on an island in the Seine as a sacrifice to the Norse god Odin, and of course as a psychological way of instilling terror among the Frankish troops that remained. Despite the brutality of these tactics, Ragnar's fleet eventually returned to their overlord, the Danish king Horik I. Unfortunately, Ragnar soon succumbed to a violent illness that also affected Denmark. In earlier sources, such as Norman historian William of Jumièges, writing around 1070, we find references to a King Lodbrok who ascended the Danish throne by custom of expelling younger royal sons to prevent internal conflict. This Lodbrok commanded his junior son Bjorn Ironside to leave Denmark, leading to Bjorn's raid across West Francia and later the Mediterranean. Adam of Bremen, writing near contemporaneously with William, mentions several Viking leaders active during the 9th century, including Ivar, described as a cruel persecutor of Christians and identified with as the son of Lodbrok. This aligns with other accounts that detailed the notorious activities of Ragnar's sons, further entwining the historical and legendary narratives of the Lodbrok lineage. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle and Acer's Life of Alfred mention the 878 invasion of Devon, England, by the, quote, brother of Hingwar and Helfden, part of the great heathen army, which resulted in a significant Viking defeat at the Battle of Kinwit. The Saxons captured the Vikings' Raven banner, kinda like capturing the eagle for the Romans, or from the Romans rather. It was believed to predict the outcome of battles, this wise raven they carried with them, and it was a legend that was connected to the daughters of Lodbrok, who were said to have crafted the banner themselves. Further references to Ragnar and his kin appear in Irish chronicles, such as the Cogad Gedal Regaleb, which renames Halfdan as Mac Ragnael, and 3 fragments which recount the adventures and eventual fate of Ragnar's descendants in the Mediterranean. These varied sources, from French, Norman, Anglo-Saxon, and even Irish traditions, don't they all just come together nicely to show this widespread influence and enduring legacy of Ragnar and his family? Of course, there's no one story about Ragnar Lodbrok. In fact, even in modern times, and for modern sensibilities and for the sake of entertainment, they wrote him a completely new saga. Now, the great heathen army which invaded England in 865 is a significant element of Viking history intertwined with Ragnar's legend. According to Norse sagas and some historical accounts, this formidable force was led by Ragnar's sons as a campaign of vengeance against King Eilor, who was the one who threw Ragnar into that pit of venomous snakes. The army was significantly reinforced by the arrival of the Great Summer Army from Scandinavia in 871, led by King Basek of Denmark. This influx of warriors had bolstered Halfdan's forces during crucial engagements against the West Saxons. One of the notable battles during this period was the Battle of Ashdown on the 8th of January 871, and it was at this battle where King Basek was killed. Following his death, Halfdan accepted a truce from Alfred the Great, who had recently become the King of Wessex. With Basek's death, Halfdan emerged as the sole king of the invading Viking forces. Halfdan is also noted in some sources as potentially holding a kingship in part of Denmark, possibly Jutland. It is supported by Frankish sources in 873, mentioning a co-ruler named Halfdan. His rule illustrates the complex and often overlapping leadership roles that were pretty typical among the Viking leaders of this period. Now, for the moment, that's enough about Ragnar. So let's move on to a little bit of a different time period and talk about another famous Viking. I'm sure that you have heard of the great Leif Erikson. So let's talk about him for a while. Leif Erikson, a prominent figure in the exploration history of the Norse, the son of Eric the Red and his wife Theodhild. Through his paternal line, he was the grandson of Thorvald Asvaldsson. The saga of Eric the Red recounts that Thorvald was exiled from Norway due to a charge of manslaughter, leading his family to settle in Iceland, a land that had been recently colonized by Norse settlers, primarily from Norway, in the century before Leif's birth. Notably, Leif also had a distant familial connection to Nadod, an explorer credited with the discovery of Iceland. Leif is believed to have been born in the 970s, although specific details about his birthplace, in the sagas at least, are not provided. But it is generally accepted, based on various sources, that he was indeed likely born in Iceland. Thus his birth took place somewhere around the edge of Haukadal, where his mother's family resided. Now Eric the Red, after being banished from Iceland following further disputes, ventured westward and discovered Greenland. He named the land, and after a brief return to Iceland to gather his family and other colonists, he led an expedition back to Greenland and established the region's first permanent settlement in 986. Thus, Leif had spent his formative years in Greenland, growing up on the family estate of Brattahlid, located in the eastern settlement. Leif had two brothers, Thorstein and Thorvald, and a sister named Freydis. His upbringing was closely overseen by Tyrker, one of Eric's thralls, who was entrusted with the care of Eric's children. Leif later regarded Tyrker as his foster father, highlighting the significant role Tyrker had played in his early life. This familial and social background set the stage for Leif's own adventures, including his eventual exploration of the areas west of Greenland, notably what is believed to be modern-day Newfoundland, marking the first known European encounter with North America, centuries before Columbus. Now the saga of Eric the Red and the saga of the Greenlanders, both thought to have been composed around the year 1200, provide narratives on the Norse voyages to Vinland, which is generally interpreted as coastal North America. These sagas, along with the mention of the work of Adam of Bremen around 1075, and in Ari the Wise's Book of Icelanders compiled around 1122, constitute the primary medieval sources for information about these explorations. Saga of Eric the Red's account. According to the Saga of Eric the Red, Leif Erikson discovered Vinland somewhat by chance. You see, having spent time at the court of the Norwegian king, King Olav Tryggvason, Leif had converted to Christianity and was returning from Norway to Greenland with the mission of spreading the new faith. It was during this voyage that a storm blew his ship off course, leading him and his crew to the shores of an unknown land. Upon exploring the area, they found wild grapes, self-sown wheat, and maple trees, which were significant because they indicated a hospitable land with resources valuable for Norse settlements. Thus Leif and his crew collected samples of these resources, and on their return journey to Greenland, they rescued a group of shipwrecked soldiers. These acts, along with his role in converting the Greenlandic Norse to Christianity, earned Leif the epithet Leif the Lucky. Thus Leif himself did not return to Vinland, but his discovery led others from Greenland and Iceland, including Thorfinn Karlsefni, to further explore and at least attempt to make permanent settlements there. Saga of the Greenlanders account. The saga of the Greenlanders offers a slightly different narrative, suggesting that Leif was in fact not the first European to visit Vinland. Instead, it credits Bjarni Herjolfsson with the initial discovery during a voyage from Iceland to Greenland, which went awry due to severe winds and fog. Bjarni and his crew sighted an unknown coast, but they did not disembark, instead noting the land and eventually returning to Greenland, where they reported their findings. Approximately 15 years after Bjarni's accidental discovery, Leif Erikson, intrigued by Bjarni's stories, bought Bjarni's ship and assembled a crew of 35 men for an expedition aimed at exploring the lands that Bjarni had described. Leif's father, Eric the Red, initially planned to join the expedition, but withdrew after interpreting a fall from his horse as a bad omen. Following the route in reverse as described by Bjarni, Leif first landed in a rocky place he named Helluland, believed to be the modern-day Baffin Island or northern Labrador. He then sailed further and arrived at a forested area he named Markland, likely near modern Labrador. Continuing the voyage, he reached a fertile region rich in salmon and decided to winter there, naming it Vinland due to the abundance of wild grapevines discovered by one of his men, Tyrker. In Vinland, Leif and his crew established a small camp called Leifsbudir. After spending the winter, Leif returned to Greenland in the spring with a cargo of grapes and timber, and, once again, demonstrated his luck by rescuing another group of Icelandic castaways. Despite the promising qualities of Vinland, Leif never returned according to this saga, but his initial journey did inspire subsequent expeditions from Greenland and Iceland, continuing the Norse exploration of North America, just as noted in the original saga. Now, Leif was celebrated in the Vinland sagas as a man of wisdom, compassion, and formidable presence, one who embarked on a transformative journey that not only led to significant geographical discoveries, but marked a pivotal point in the religious history of Greenland. At this suitable age, Leif had travelled to Norway, likely with the intention of serving at the court of King Olav Tyrfingsson, and during this voyage his ship was driven off course to the Hebrides, where he spent much of the summer, delayed by the unfavourable winds. And it was there that Leif encountered Thorgunna, a noble woman with whom he had a brief relationship, resulting in the birth of his son, Thorgils. Now, despite the connection, Leif left Thorgunna in the Hebrides, respecting her family's wishes not to take her with him without their permission. Thorgils was later sent to join Leif in Greenland, but failed to gain popularity there. Upon reaching Norway and entering the service of King Olav Tyrfingsson, Leif converted to Christianity, this significant turning point in his life. King Olaf had tasked him with returning to Greenland to convert its Norse settlers to Christianity on his return journey, as recorded in the saga of Eric the Red and the Heimskringla version of Olav Tyrfingsson's saga. Leif was once again blown off course, which serendipitously led to the discovery of Vinland. Eventually, he did reach Greenland, where he faced his father Eric's resistance to Christianity, while his mother, Theodhildur, embraced the new faith and constructed a church. Interestingly, the Flateyjarbok's version of the Olaf Tryggvason saga does not mention Leif's accidental discovery of Vinland, but it focuses on his role in successfully converting the Greenlandic settlers, including his previously pagan father Eric the Red. To facilitate this religious transition, Leif is said to have brought back a priest and clerics to Greenland with him. While following his historic explorations and religious missions, Leif assumed a leadership role in Greenland upon the death of his father around the year 1000, becoming the paramount chief. He is last noted in historical records as being alive in 1018 in the saga of St. Olaf. By 1025, according to the saga of the Swan brothers, the chieftaincy of Eriksfjordur had passed on to his son Thorkel, suggesting Leif's death occurred between these years. The details of his death remain unrecorded in the sagas, and little else is known about his family beyond Thorkel's succession. Thus his legacy, marked by his exploratory achievements and his pivotal role in the Christianization of Greenland, remains a cornerstone in Norse history and heritage. Okay, hope you are enjoying it so far. Let's move on to the next character, that being the famous Bjorn Ironside. Bjorn, known in history as a powerful Viking chieftain and naval commander, emerges prominently in the annals of the mid-9th century, so this one's a little bit earlier. His activities are recorded in the contemporary source, such as the Annals Bertiniani and the Chronicon Fontalensis, with his earliest mention in the summer of 855. A detailed account of his origins, later provided by William of Jumièges in his Norman history written about 1070, is another source. According to this, the Danish practice of requiring younger royal sons to leave the kingdom was instituted to consolidate the king's authority. Hence, following Ragnar Lodbrok's ascension to the throne, he compelled his son Bjorn to depart Denmark with a formidable fleet, subsequently taking Bjorn's raids into West Francia. In 855, Bjorn, alongside another Viking leader named Sigtyrg, navigated the Seine, using it as a base to conduct inland raids. Their combined forces encountered resistance in Champagne, where they were engaged by Charles the Bold, the king of West Francia. Though the battle was not decisive, it did lead to Sigtrygg's withdrawal the following year. Meanwhile, Bjorn, bolstered by reinforcements from another Viking contingent, continued to occupy the Seine region. He established winter quarters at a site known as Givold's Grave, and later constructed a fortification on the island of Oisel above Rouen, which he maintained as his stronghold for several years. The conflict escalated with Bjorn's forces launching an assault on Paris around New Year of 856–57, resulting in the city being plundered. In 858, Bjorn swore fealty to Charles the Bold at Verberie, though it does remain unclear whether he adhered to this pledge. Subsequent events saw Charles attempting to dislodge Bjorn and his men from Oisel with a significant military effort in July of that year. The siege, however, was unsuccessful due to the Vikings' robust defense, and was further complicated by the invasion of Charles' lands by his brother, Louis the German, the king of East Francia. This internal conflict led to the defection of many of Charles' vassals, forcing him to abandon the siege in September. Following his encounter with Charles at Verberie, records of Bjorn's activities in contemporary sources fade. Nevertheless, the Viking presence in the Seine persisted on, culminating in another plundering of Paris in 861. In a desperate bid to counteract these Viking raids, Charles the Bold attempted to manipulate another Viking chief, Beyland, who was active in the Somme region, to attack Bjorn's forces at Oisel. But this attempt backfired when the two Viking groups negotiated an alliance with each other instead. By 1861-62, the Viking forces encamped along the lower Seine disbanded, with Valand converting to Christianity and entering royal service. Meanwhile, other members of the Seine Vikings returned to sea, some joining the ongoing conflicts in Bretagne with local rulers and Frankish counts. The Viking incursions into the Mediterranean during 859-61, led by notable figures such as Hastin and Bjorn himself, stands as one of the boldest Viking raids that history has recorded. This expedition, involving the extensive maritime navigation and military engagements, began with the Viking raids along the Iberian coast and through the Strait of Gibraltar. Following these initial assaults, the Vikings ventured deeper into the Mediterranean, pillaging the south of France, where they overwintered before advancing to Italy and capturing the city of Pisa. Their campaign continued with successes across the Mediterranean, including actions in Sicily and North Africa. Despite these triumphs, the Norse fleet faced significant losses, with 40 ships destroyed by a storm and an additional 2 decimated by fire catapults during a surprise attack by Andalusian forces near Medina, Sidonia. These setbacks reduced their fleet significantly, leaving only 20 ships intact as they returned to French waters in 862. Bjorn Ironside, identified in later chronicles, such as that by William of Jumièges, emerges as the primary leader of this audacious expedition. However, the early 11th century fragmentary annals of Ireland attribute leadership to 2 sons of Ragnar mac Albdan, a chief from the Orkney Islands, adding another layer of complexity and multiple narratives to the historical account. As you can see, the prevailing theme with this Viking history is kind of trying to piece it together from lots of different sagas and sources. Now, William of Jumièges describes Bjorn as Bier Costa Ferre, Ironside, and as the son of King Lodbrok. He emphasizes the influential role of Hastin, Bjorn's foster father, in raiding activities throughout France and the bold Mediterranean raid. One notable episode during their Mediterranean raids was their attempt to capture the town of Luni, which they mistakenly believed was Rome. Hastin's deceptive strategy to gain entry into the town, feigning a deathbed conversion to Christianity, shows another cunning and audacity of the typical Viking tactics. Well, despite their initial success in entering Luni, they eventually realized their mistake, and identifying the city, upon hearing of the formidable Roman defenses, they decided that it was probably not wise to pursue an attack on Rome itself. Well, after their Mediterranean exploits, Bjorn and Hastin parted ways. According to William, Bjorn experienced a shipwreck off the English coast, narrowly survived, but eventually died in Frisia. This account, while quite vivid, poses historical challenges, particularly regarding the timeline of Hastin's life, suggesting he would have been extremely old during these events if he indeed participated in them. Moreover, the historical record notes that Luni had also been targeted by Saracens, adding to the complexities of Viking interactions in the region. And now for the last one of today. It's Ivar the Boneless. So Ivar the Boneless, a figure renowned for his leadership during the Viking invasions of England and Ireland, has a history that's both intriguing as it is mysterious. Now this name, the Boneless, is sometimes translated as legless, and has been a topic of speculation among scholars. There are a few interpretations that range from physical condition to other symbolic meanings. He's traditionally identified as the son of the legendary Ragnar Lodbrok and his wife Aslaug. His brothers are noted as Bjorn Ironside, Halvan Hvitserk, Sigurd's Snake in the Eye, and Ragnvald. These familial ties, however, are more steeped in legend than confirmed history. Thus the historical accuracy of Ivar's lineage and his connection to these figures is often debated. Notably, Ivar is also thought to be synonymous with Imar, who was the Viking ruler of Dublin between 870 and 73. It's this connection that suggests that Ivar might have been a significant figure in the Norse establishment of Ireland as well as England. Some sources also propose that he could have been born around 787 in Uppsala, Sweden, though this too is speculative and not widely concerned. Now, the etymology of Ivar's nickname, in Norse poorly pronounced Beinlause, reflects the ambiguity surrounding his physical condition. Now, in Old Norse, Bein can mean both bone and leg, which has led to the dual translation of boneless and legless, and it's this ambiguity that has fueled various theories. Some sagas describe Ivar as having a condition that affected his legs or bones. One theory suggests that he may have suffered from osteogenesis imperfecta, a genetic disorder that leads to brittleness of the bones, which could, metaphorically, render somebody boneless. However, this is purely speculative, as the sagas are not specific medical texts and often use symbolic language. Another interpretation of the name is linked to male impotence, as mentioned in a passage from the Tale of Ragnar's Sons. This interpretation posits that the nickname might have been a more metaphorical or derogatory in its origin, potentially used to denote a perceived deficiency or a unique trait that set him apart from his peers. Well, either way, the enigmatic figure of Ivar the Boneless, as recounted in the tale of Ragnar Lodbrok, is one that is just another mystery among the sagas. The sagas often provide us with a mystical explanation for his condition, and, well, we've not found his actual bones to check for ourselves. Perhaps we will one day. Now, there is another origin that explains the condition via a curse. According to this, Ivar's unusual physical condition was the result of a curse stemming from his parents' haste to consummate their marriage. His mother, Aslaug, who was not only Ragnar Lodbrok's third wife, but also a volva, which is a Norse seer or clairvoyant, advised that they should wait for 3 nights before consummating their reunion after Ragnar's return from England. However, Ragnar, driven by passion, ignored her counsel, leading to Ivar's birth in what was described as weak bones. A more secular hypothesis about the origin of his nickname suggests a linguistic misunderstanding. It suggests that he might have originally been called the Hated or exosus in Latin. A medieval scribe, perhaps with limited knowledge of Latin, could have misinterpreted exosus, the hated, as ex os, without bone. You know, osteo being the root of the bone in Latin, you know what I mean. Of course, this leads to the moniker, the Boneless. Could be. This theory, however, does struggle to find coherence with the direct translation from the Old Norse sources, which do clearly relate to his physical attributes. But despite the tales of his physical limitations, the sagas consistently portray Ivar as possessing a sharp mind, exceptional wisdom, and a strategic acumen in warfare, making him a formidable leader and tactician. These qualities perhaps compensated for, or even at best times overshadowed his physical challenges in the narratives of his military campaigns. Now, historically, Ivar is often equated with Imar, the founder of the Imar dynasty, which exerted considerable influence over the Irish Sea region, including dominions such as the Kingdom of Ireland and at times the control of Northumbria from York. This connection places Ivar at the center of significant political and military developments in the British Isles during the Viking Age and suggests a legacy that impacted several generations, culminating in the establishment of the Crovan dynasty. In 865, the great heathen army, purportedly led by Ivar the Boneless and motivated by vengeance, launched a significant invasion of the Anglo-Saxon Heptarchy. This confederation consisted of 7 kingdoms of East Anglia, Kent, Mercia, Essex, Northumbria, Sussex, and Wessex. The Norse incursion was ostensibly in retaliation for the death of their father, Ragnar, who was, according to legend, executed by King Eilur of Northumbria by being thrown into that snake pit. Not a good way to go. But once again, the historical accuracy of this motive, however, remains uncertain. That being said, if somebody did that to my dad, I would definitely be out for revenge. Well, according to the sagas, Ivar's approach to conquest was marked not only by force, but also by quite a bit of cunning diplomacy. Initially, Ivar sought reconciliation with Eilur, requesting only as much land as could be covered with an ox's hide. Employing a strategy reminiscent of the legendary ploy used by Dido of Carthage, Ivar then cut the ox hide into fine strips and encircled a large fortress, which the sagas variably identify as either York or London, thereby claiming it for himself. The campaign escalated in late 866 when the great heathen army advanced northward and seized control of Northumbria, capturing York and eventually apprehending Eilur. According to legendary accounts, Eilur's execution was carried out by Ivar and his brothers, using the gruesome method known as the blood eagle, where the victim's ribs are severed from the spine and spread outward to resemble wings, although the historicity of this ritual is still a bit of a debate. Still, not a good way to go, but very creative. You must give them that. Following their success in Northumbria, the Viking forces moved south in 867 to invade Mercia, taking the strategic town of Nottingham, which they used as a winter base. In response, King Buigred of Mercia, in alliance with King Aethelred of Wessex, besieged Nottingham and in an attempt to reclaim it. The siege, however, ended inconclusively, resulting in a truce that allowed the Danes to retreat to York. There they consolidated power, preparing for future offences. By 869, the army under command of Ivar and Uber returned to East Anglia, where they confronted King Edmund. When Edmund refused to renounce Christianity, he was captured and, as the legend goes, executed by the Vikings, leading to his veneration as Edmund the Martyr. While the details of Edmund's death are not precisely known, the account of his martyrdom at the hands of Ivar and Uber's forces is considered to be plausible by the majority of observers. Now, Ivar is a figure enveloped in both historical documentation and saga mythology, like any other Viking, and it presents a complex character whose life and death stir a lot of intrigue. His demise is variously dated in different historical annals. Aethelweard, an Anglo-Saxon chronicler, records his death in 870, while the Annals of Ulster and the fragmentary Annals of Ireland both mark at 873. The later date is generally accepted for the death of Imar, whom many scholars identify as the same person as Ivar due to the congruence of their activities and timelines in the historical record. The notion that Ivar was struck down by a sudden and debilitating disease toward the end of his life, as mentioned in the fragmentary annals, introduces another layer to the story of his epithet, the Boneless. This could imply that his infamous nickname may not necessarily refer to a lifelong physical condition, but perhaps a crippling disease that affected him suddenly later on in life, contradicting earlier theories that suggested genetic or congenital disorders. The discovery of a Scandinavian burial mound in Repton, Derbyshire, in 1686, which coincides geographically with the known activities of the Great Heathen Army, adds further depth to the narrative of Ivar's life and death. The burial, distinguished by a high number of partial skeletons found around it, over 250 of them, indicates the interred individuals was a significant status, leading to speculations that it could indeed be the final resting place of Ivar. Now, such a large-scale burial would be fitting for a leader of his renowned and feared reputation, but once again, it's speculation. There's no real way to prove that it's Ivar. Well, according to the sagas at least, Ivar's burial was strategically chosen to protect the land from future invasions. He was said to have requested to be buried in a spot that was vulnerable to attack, prophesying that his resting place would ward off enemies. The saga recounts that this protective spell continued until William the Conqueror, identified in the sagas as Wilhelm Bastard, disrupted it by exhuming and burning Ivar's remains before proceeding to successfully invade England. This action by William, if it did indeed occur, would symbolize a powerful, if symbolic, conclusion to the saga narrative, intertwining the fate of England with the legendary figure of Ivar the Boneless. Well, thank you very much for listening to today's video. I'd like to thank my top-tier patrons, Britt, Charles, Stark Factory, Jeffrey, JC, Wendy, Tim, and James. Thank you very much for supporting the channel. And if you would like to support the channel, well, you know what to do. But first, let's all have a nice rest and meditate on what we've learned. Maybe I'll do more Viking videos. Good night, everyone. See you next time.